Thank you. And I'm going to invite, if I can, the Honorable Dave Turk, Deputy Secretary of the U.S. Department of Energy, to join me. So if you'd welcome him, please.
Thank you. Thanks, Ben.
It's a pleasure. Well, I'm really glad you could join us. Maybe as a brief introduction, so Deputy Secretary Turk, which I believe it's okay if I call you Dave.
Dave is perfectly fine, Ben.
So prior to his nomination as Deputy Secretary, he was the Deputy Executive Director of the International Energy Agency, where you focused on helping countries around the world tackle clean energy transitions. And also during the Obama administration, he coordinated international technology and clean energy efforts at the DOE. And so we're really excited that you're here. The idea that you've been able to work at such a crossroads around innovation and catching our current moment feels like the perfect time to have a little conversation. So.
Well, thanks, Ben, and thanks for the invitation and all your colleagues at the SAFE and the SAFE Summit. Really a pleasure to be with you all.
Perfect. Well, we might go ahead and jump right into it. And so, you know, the administration, through the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure laws, rolled out a lot of financial carrots. And if, you know, the things like tax credits and loan guarantees. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about where each of these tools are targeted, how they're intended to achieve the goals of the administration, and how effective they've been so far.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. And I think it's useful for all of us to take a step back and just appreciate the range of tools and the impressive nature of the tools we have in our tool belt right now. And I wouldn't have said so much on some of these issues a couple years ago. Like, it's been quite remarkable what Congress did the last 2 years. At the Department of Energy, we've been given $100 billion over 70 new programs, cost share programs, and at the same time we have a couple hundred of our folks working with Treasury and IRS on the tax incentives. And on the issues we're talking about here in terms of critical minerals and the whole supply chain for batteries and EVs, maybe a few that I'd highlight in particular. One that's a big deal, and we're already in the midst of executing on this, is $7 billion Congress has given us to have cost share with the private sector to build out our battery manufacturing. And it's super exciting, and this is not the kind of thing that was happening 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago. We have a chance, finally, I'd say, to step up and have these jobs, these manufacturing facilities here in the U.S., reshoring in many cases, building out, to the point where we've now seen public and private investment of $80+ billion, which is super cool and super exciting. Not only good for our national security, good for our economic security, good for those communities in which these facilities are in and will be in. And that's just one of the tools. The $7 billion program, we put $2.8 billion out there in terms of awards for negotiation for contracts on that end. We've got our loan program, which is now back up and running, and really trying to do some good things in this space in addition. And then the tax credits for EVs, but tax credits otherwise. This is a big, big deal, and we're trying to make sure that all of these things work together so that we use payers for our broader society.
It's a really exciting moment. I feel like, you know, we've been sort of asking for people to pay attention to EVs for so long, and now we've caught the EV, so to speak, and it's our EV moment. So it's really an incredible time to be a part of this. But you mentioned the DOE loan guarantee program, and some would say they maybe are a little complicated, and they have a high transaction costs, and maybe they're not super accessible for small and mid-sized companies. So what's your vision, or what's the DOE's vision for how to improve that for the loan guarantee program and maybe make it more accessible?
Yeah, so the loan program, acronym LPO, everything in government has an acronym, but we'll just call it the Loan Program Office. When we came in, when this president came in, we made it a top priority to reinvigorate the loan program. This is the office that was responsible for a critical loan in Tesla's early growth at a particularly critical time. This is the office that was responsible for utility PV, utility scale PV really getting up and running, having the funding at that critical time to take some of that additional risk before the private sector was fully ready, private investors really ready to get that industry up and running. So we're trying to be very strategic, trying to be very consultative back and forth along those lines, and feeling really good about what we've done so far. So we've had 5 big loans that have been announced. We've got many, many more coming down the pike. One of the jobs I have is to chair what we call our credit review board, which is all the loans going through before we send them up to the secretary and we publicly announce them. And there's quite a few loans in this space, which is really, really exciting, and some really creative projects. There's one that was announced publicly, $375 million, that is a really cool, cool project, but there'll be other ones coming as well. Now, given the extent of the back and forth and the due diligence on load program, this is for over 100 million. These are for bigger projects. The average, I think, size is about $1 billion. But we have other tools in the tool belt beyond the loan program. So if that's too big for the stage that a business is in or an entrepreneur's in, we've got ARPA-E, we've got a number of other programs that are scaled to different sizes.
We created a sort of federal funder finding tool, and it helps sort of break down some of those things, because sometimes it's hard. If I want to buy a bus, like what's the right program to do it and what jurisdictions are eligible. But it's good to see the loan program creating similar approaches to try and help.
Well, this is one of the biggest challenges that we face, and we're trying to spend a lot of time and effort, and I know there's philanthropy and others and SAFE and other groups. We need to translate this huge range of opportunities and target it for those who can take full advantage of it. And what's particularly exciting is for many of our cost shares, there's a fixed amount, right? Congress gives us, for instance, $8 billion on hydrogen hubs, or $7 billion to build out the battery manufacturing facilities. But for a lot of the tax credits, there's no ceiling. So it's as much as companies, as much as entrepreneurs, as much as folks want to take advantage of those tax incentives, and that's great. That's more jobs, that's more business, that's greater benefit on the climate front and national security front as well. So
maybe just a little bit of a transition here, but the administration has a goal called Justice 40, where 40% of the benefits of clean energy should go towards those who are historically harmed by fossil fuel pollution or fear of being left behind by the energy transition. And I'm just interested if you might share a little bit about how the policy tools available to the administration for EV infrastructure and deployment are being used to support these communities.
Yeah, so this is what's, I think, particularly exciting is we have a real win-win-win-win, and I could probably even list a few more wins opportunity here, right? Like, given the scale, the size of some of these tools in the tool belt, I think we have a chance, and we're going to need to execute, and other countries around the world are going to need to step up. We have a chance to actually achieve our climate goals and to save our planet. That's a pretty nice win in and of itself. At the same time, we have huge opportunities for businesses, for U.S. businesses, to make a bucket load of cash and do good things in the process. Like, that's a pretty significant win as well. We've made a priority to make sure these are quality jobs, and so we've got great wins for individuals and families. And then we also have a win, and I think this is one we spend a lot of time at the department and throughout this administration, taking care of, or let me put it this way, providing opportunities for communities that have gotten screwed in the past in one way or another. And there's a variety of different communities and folks that have gotten screwed in the past. Justice 40 is one of the tools that we have. The president laid down a marker very early on that the benefits that we're all putting in, taxpayers are putting in, 40% of those benefits should accrue, should happen, should provide opportunities for communities that haven't had the same opportunities that others have had historically. At the Department of Energy, we've got 140 of our programs now that are Justice 40 covered, where we're trying to live this, to execute this, to put in place the methodology, the rigor associated with it. That is a huge opportunity, again, win-win-win-win opportunity. The other thing I'd like to highlight is for our grant programs. So when we give out 50% cost share or 30% cost share, this includes our battery manufacturing grants that I mentioned earlier. We're also trying to instill in that process a full 20% of the grading for who gets those awards based on community benefits plans. So if you want money, taxpayer money, you've got to show that you're benefiting the community around you. You've got to show that you've actually engaged the community. You've got to show that you're doing right by your workers and really working on all of those public policy goals. The response we've seen has been tremendous, and I think businesses, especially those who want to be around for many, many years, appreciate that it not only is the right thing to do, but it can make them more money and have the social license to operate for a longer period of time. So it's incredibly exciting to kind of live the values that we're talking about.
So it's like 6 wins now we're up to?
6 wins at least. You can go on and on. There's other wins that can be win for national security, win for economic competitiveness, win for encouraging other countries to get their acts together and invest more.
So maybe, I'm curious, because sometimes when we get into these kinds of programs and we think about disadvantaged communities, it's really just thought of as, sort of dense urban communities. But how are you thinking about these programs connecting to rural electrification?
Yeah, so it's a lot of communities have gotten screwed in the past. It's not just urban communities, but it's a lot of...
The official line of the program?
The official line. I know I probably should speak more officially, but this is the last session, I think, for the day.
I'm sure you're fine. It's good.
So hopefully no one will tweet out and I won't get in trouble for somebody. I was actually just at a meeting with Treasury colleagues and Department of Agriculture colleagues, and there's a huge opportunity in rural America. I come from a small town in Illinois, and so kind of this is personal for me, I suspect for many others as well. And there's huge opportunities. There's huge opportunities for rural America, whether it's PV facilities, whether it's wind turbines, whether it's mining operations, whether it's a whole range of economic opportunities. The Department of Agriculture has, I think it's $13–14 billion that have been given in these bills. We've got several programs. One I'm particularly excited about is a flexible $1 billion, which in the grand scheme of things of all these programs, it's still a lot. $1 billion is still a lot of money that we can work with towns under 10,000 people across the country in a very flexible way to supplement, to support. One of the biggest challenges I think we have in this space is making sure that those towns, making sure that those mayors, making sure that those community leaders have the bandwidth, the information to take advantage of some of these opportunities, including the tax credits. So that's going to require an awful lot of sweat equity on our part to engage, to have that iterative back and forth conversation. But that's what we need to do.
We've started doing these rural electrification workshops, and it's been a really important opportunity to sort of talk about what are the benefits, and if you're in a rural community, how do you experience those? Because that hasn't been the point of focus so far, and it's been interesting to see how people start to think about that and how do I apply this to my community. I actually grew up in St. Anne, Illinois, so another small town.
Okay. How many people? What was your town size?
The town of St. Anne was about 6,000.
6,000. Okay,
Yeah,
mine's
right
9,000.
Oh.
All right.
Big city.
There you go.
Big city Dave. That's what we would call you. Well, let me before we run out of time, I do want to get to one more question, and we'll figure out if we have a couple others. But the president's goal is for, and this is a big question. It's the 9,000 people question, not the 6,000 people. The president's goal is for half of vehicles to be EVs by 2030. So, how realistic is that? And can you describe the path to get there?
So I feel really good. It's going to require a lot of work. Nothing that gets done in the U.S. is the government dictating things from on high. That's not how our system of government, that's not how our society works. It's a lot of businesses, it's entrepreneurs going out there and doing things. But there is a role for the government to provide incentives, to provide guardrails, to make sure we're internalizing externalities. And I feel really good that we're going to see remarkable progress on electrification more generally, but EVs in particular. So just a few numbers. About 5 years ago, around the world, 1 out of every 70 cars was an EV that was sold. Last year, the number went up to 1 in 7. And we're about 1 in 10, maybe a little bit less than that in the US. China's 1 in 4. Europe's 1 in 5. But if you look at where the numbers are going forward, J.D. Power's put out some numbers recently, it's a pretty significant ramp. And the tax incentives and the electrification, we've got $7.5 billion working with the Department of Transportation to build out our electricity or our EV grid and EV charging network across the country to reduce the range anxiety along those lines. But it's not even and a lot of us have EVs, including for climate benefit. You get the climate benefit from it. But what I've found with my EV at least, and I hear this again and again with colleagues, even those who aren't as much driven by the climate benefit and trying to do it for that reason, it's a whole lot cheaper once you buy the car, and we're working on the affordability issue, and the $7,500 credit I think will help on that end. The amount of money you save every time you charge it up instead of fill it up is quite remarkable. The personal thing that I like the most about it is the relatively less maintenance So I've had mine for 22,000 miles. I've literally had to put air in one of the tires, and that's it. Like, that is the full amount of maintenance so far. It's quieter, it's got better performance. So I think as more and more people drive EVs, the word of mouth will get out there, the tax incentives will help, building out the EV charging infrastructure. There's national security benefits if we get the critical minerals and the mining and other pieces in shape like we need to and we're working on as well. So I personally feel quite bullish about where we're headed on the EV front.
Well, I'm excited to hear you say that. I tend to agree. I hope that we can be a great partner with the Department of Energy and the administration to do that, and obviously a lot of the businesses and folks that are represented here today. And you know, my 5-year-old has like she thinks a gas station is just where you like go get candy. So right now she thinks it's awesome, but you know, I'm glad that that's what she thinks a gas station is for. Maybe with the dentist probably not as happy about that, but. Well, if everyone could please join me in thanking Secretary Turk for being Deputy Secretary.
Thanks, everybody.
I just gave you a promotion.
That's great. Thanks.